are breaking into programming to go straight to the UK Supreme Court in London, where judges have just ruled against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to suspend Parliament. Let's listen to Supreme Court Judge BRENDA HALE.
The advice was unlawful. The Inner House went further and declared that any prorogation resulting from it was null and of no effect. The government argues that the Inner House could not do that because the prorogation was a, quote, proceeding in Parliament, end quote, which, under the Bill of Rights of 1688, cannot be impugned or questioned in any court. But it is quite clear that the prorogation is not a proceeding in Parliament. It takes place in the House of Lords chamber, in the presence of members of both houses, but it is not their decision. It is something which has been imposed upon them from outside. It is not something on which members can speak or vote. It is not the core or essential business of Parliament which the Bill of Rights protects. Quite the reverse. It brings that core or essential business to an end. This court has already concluded that the Prime Minister's advice to Her Majesty was unlawful, void, and of no effect. This means that the order in council to which it led was also unlawful, void, and of no effect, and should be quashed. This means that when the Royal Commissioners walked into the House of Lords, it was as if they had walked in with a blank sheet of paper. The prorogation was also void and of no effect. Parliament has not been prorogued. This is the unanimous judgment of all 11 justices. It is for Parliament, and in particular the Speaker and the Lord Speaker, to decide what to do next. Unless there is some parliamentary rule of which we are unaware, they can take immediate steps to enable each House to meet as soon as possible. It is not clear to us that any step is needed from the Prime Minister, but if it is, the Court is pleased that his counsel have told the Court that he will take all necessary steps to comply with the terms of any declaration made by this Court. It follows that the Advocate General's appeal in the case of Cherry is dismissed and Mrs. Miller's appeal is allowed. The same declarations and orders should be made in each case. Copies of our full judgment explaining these conclusions and a transcript of this summary will be available immediately after the Court rises, and I urge you all to read them with care. The Court will now adjourn.
You are looking at live pictures from the UK Supreme Court, the highest court in the United Kingdom, where the court has ruled on the legality of Johnson's 5-week suspension of Parliament, ruling that it was unlawful. Well, let's bring in our correspondent Rory Challens, who's outside the Supreme Court in London. Rory, a damning ruling there by the UK's highest court. Clearly, this is going to be a huge blow for the British government and for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Where can he go from here?
This is, as you say, a deep blow, heavy blow for Boris Johnson and his Parliament. The ruling given by the Supreme Court on the 3 questions that it was considering was unanimous. All 11 justices essentially ruled against the government on this. They were being asked, was this matter justiciable? Is it a thing that the courts should have decided on, rather than being just a political matter that Boris Johnson, as the Prime Minister, had every right to do to prorogue Parliament? Well, the Supreme Justice, you can hear some whoops of celebration there from campaigners who have placards saying "Don't silence MPs" over there. They are very pleased with this decision. So yes, the Supreme Court said that this was a justiciable matter. It was an issue for the courts, not just for Boris Johnson and his right as Prime Minister. They also decided that this was not a routine prorogation, a routine suspension of Parliament, as the government has argued all along. It's basically been saying that This was the longest parliamentary session in modern times, and therefore it was totally normal for a new Prime Minister to be able to suspend Parliament for a few weeks and come up with a new platform of legislation. The Supreme Court has said no, this clearly was not normal, not routine. This was something that was done at a critical point in parliamentary activity when serious matters were being debated by the Houses of Parliament, and therefore it was denying the Houses of Parliament the ability to do its duty. Then the most serious question of all, was this lawful? Did Boris Johnson have the right to do this? Was he acting lawfully? And unanimously, these justices all decided that no, he wasn't. So effectively, the suspension of Parliament is void. It has no effect. That's what Lady Hale was saying there. It now is up to the speakers of the Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, to work out what happens next. But effectively, this means that, as she just said, Parliament is still in session, and it's be brought at any time. And Boris Johnson has said that he will respect whatever the court decides. The ball is in his court now.
It absolutely certainly is. It was quite a damning statement that Supreme Court Judge Brenda Hale said, saying that Parliament has not been prorogued, basically saying that the strategy, as Boris Johnson's rivals claim he has implemented here, was really to make sure that MPs were out of the way to push forward with the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. This will come as a very positive move, of course, to Boris Johnson's rivals, no? Rory, before
I think so, yes, because this is a devastating judgment.
Rory, we're just going to jump in there, Rory, because some key figures have come outside the Supreme Court and are speaking now to the media. Let's listen in.
We're going to read a short, pre-prepared statement, and then we'll take questions from you all. The last few weeks have seen an extraordinary series of attacks on our democracy. A parliament elected from 46 million of us was unlawfully suspended by a Prime Minister elected from 160,000. Judges have been threatened by a number 10 source, and those of us who have sought to protect the only institution in our Constitution with a UK-wide democratic mandate have been subject to death threats, and some of us have had our home addresses published. I am delighted today that the Supreme Court has protected the foundational principle of any democracy, which is the right of members of Parliament to do their jobs for which they were elected. There is much yet to be done to protect our democracy. For myself, I am very grateful to the exceptional legal team and to the almost 8,000 small donors who enabled this case to go ahead. The victory is theirs.